Infinity Media, met your favorites here.
Okay. Welcome to Infinity Media, where we bring you the hottest hits and the latest information, lessons, breaking news, and various entertainments. I'm your host, Yarlik the Creator, and I've got a great lineup for you today. Just be with me in today's content that has prepared for you. So stay watching Infinity Media. Also, you have to subscribe and to press a bell icon to get each of our new contents if it's your first time to met this channel, but also to like, to share and to comment. Okay, let's get started as soon as possible. Let's go.
One Martin Luther King, Jr. He was born on January 15, 1929, at Atlanta, Georgia, in United States, and he died on April 4, 1968. He was a Baptist minister and social activist who led the civil rights movement in the United States from the mid-1950s until his death by assassination in 1968. His leadership was fundamental to that movement's success in ending the legal segregation of African Americans in the South and other parts of the United States. King rose to national prominence as head of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, which promoted nonviolent tactics, such as the Massive March on Washington 1963, to achieve civil rights. He was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. Martin Luther King Jr. worked hard to make people understand that not only black people but that all races should always be treated equally to white people. He gave speeches to encourage African Americans to protest without using violence. Led by Dr. King and others, many African Americans used nonviolent, peaceful strategies to fight for their civil rights. These strategies included sit-ins, boycotts, and protest marches. Often, they were attacked by white police officers or people who did not want African Americans to have more rights. However, no matter how badly they were attacked, Dr. King and his followers never fought back. King also helped to organize the 1963 March on Washington, where he delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech. The next year, he won the Nobel Peace Prize. King fought for equal rights from the start of the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955 until he was murdered in April 1968. King came from a comfortable middle-class family steeped in the tradition of the Southern Black ministry. Both his father and maternal grandfather were Baptist preachers. His parents were college-educated, and King's father had succeeded his father-in-law as pastor of the prestigious Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta. The family lived on Auburn Avenue, otherwise known as Sweet Auburn, the bustling Black Wall Street, home to some of the country's largest and most prosperous black businesses and black churches in the years before the civil rights movement. Young Martin received a solid education and grew up in a loving extended family. This secure upbringing, however, did not prevent King from experiencing the prejudices then common in the South. He never forgot the time when, at about age 6, one of his white playmates announced that his parents would no longer allow him to play with King, because the children were now attending segregated schools. Dearest to King in these early years was his maternal grandmother, whose death in 1941 left him shaken and unstable. Upset because he had learned of her fatal heart attack while attending a parade without his parents' permission. The 12-year-old king attempted suicide by jumping from a second-story window. Martin Luther King, Jr. is known for his contributions to the American Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. His most famous work is his "I Have a Dream" speech, delivered in 1963, in which he spoke of his dream of a United States that is void of segregation and racism.
Millions of Negro slaves who had been seared in the flames of withering injustice. It came as a joyous daybreak to end the long night of their captivity. But 100 years later, the Negro still is not free. 100 years later, the life of the Negro is still sadly crippled by the manacles of segregation.
Death threats. As early as the mid-1950s, King had received death threats because of his prominence in the civil rights movement. He had confronted the risk of death, including a nearly fatal stabbing in 1958, and made its recognition part of his philosophy. He taught that murder could not stop the struggle for equal rights. After the assassination of President Kennedy in 1963, King told his wife,
"This is what is going to happen to me also. I keep telling you, this is a sick society."
What was the first attempt to assassinate Martin Luther King? Izola Curry, née Ware, June 14, 1916, March 7, 2015, was a woman who attempted to assassinate the civil rights leader Martin Luther King, Jr. She stabbed King with a letter opener at a Harlem book signing on September 20, 1958, during the Harlem Civil Rights Movement of the late 1950s and early 1960s.
So I only hope that this is a beginning that will lead to peace in that troubled country. And I would follow that up by saying that I hope our country, on the basis of this, will further de-escalate. For after all, for the last 2 days, even after the president's...
On Thursday, April 4, 1968, King was staying in room 306 at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. The motel was owned by businessman Walter Bailey and was named after his wife. Reverend Ralph Abernathy, a colleague and friend, later told the House Select Committee on Assassinations that he and King had stayed in room 306 at the Lorraine Motel so often that it was known as the King-Abernathy Suite. According to biographer Taylor Branch, King's last words were to musician Ben Branch, who was scheduled to perform that night at a planned event. King said,
"Ben, make sure you play Take My Hand, Precious Lord, in the meeting tonight. Play it real pretty."
According to Reverend Samuel Kiles, who was standing several feet away, King was leaning over the balcony railing in front of room 306 and was speaking with Rev. Jesse Jackson when the shot rang out. King was struck in the face at 6:01 p.m. by a single .3006 bullet fired from a Remington Model 760 rifle. The bullet entered through King's right cheek, breaking his jaw and several vertebrae as it traveled down his spinal cord, severing his jugular vein and major arteries in the process, before lodging in his shoulder. The force of the shot ripped King's necktie off. King fell backward onto the balcony, unconscious. Abernathy heard the shot from inside the motel room and ran to the balcony to find King on the deck, bleeding profusely from the wound in his cheek. Jesse Jackson stated after the shooting that he cradled King's head as King lay on the balcony, but this account was disputed by other colleagues of King. Jackson later changed his statement to say that he had reached out for King. Andrew Young, a colleague from the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, first believed King was dead, but found he still had a pulse. King was rushed to St. Joseph's Hospital, where doctors opened his chest and performed cardiopulmonary resuscitation. He never regained consciousness and died at 7:05 p.m. According to Branch, King's autopsy revealed that his heart was in the condition of a 60-year-old man rather than that of a 39-year-old such as King, which Branch attributed to the stress of King's 13 years in the civil rights movement. Shortly after the shot was fired, witnesses saw a man, later believed to be James Earl Ray, fleeing from a rooming house across the street from the Lorraine Motel. Ray had been renting a room in the boarding house. Police found a package dumped close to the site that included a rifle and binoculars, both with Ray's fingerprints. James Earl Ray. He was born on March 10, 1928, and died on April 23, 1998. He was an American fugitive who was convicted of the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. at the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee, on April 4, 1968. After the assassination, Ray fled the United States and was captured in the United Kingdom. Ray was convicted in 1969 after entering a guilty plea, thus foregoing a jury trial and the possibility of a death sentence, and was sentenced to 99 years of imprisonment. Ray had purchased the rifle under an alias 6 days earlier. A worldwide manhunt was triggered that culminated in Ray's arrest at Heathrow Airport, London, 2 months later. On March 10, 1969, he pleaded guilty to the first-degree murder of Martin Luther King Jr., which was later recanted. Ray died on April 23, 1998, just 19 days after the 30th anniversary of King's assassination, at the age of 70, at the Columbia-Nashville Memorial Hospital in Madison, Tennessee, from complications related to kidney disease and liver failure caused by hepatitis. His brother Jerry told CNN that his brother did not want to be buried or have his final resting place in the United States because of the way the government had treated him. His body was cremated and his ashes were flown to Ireland, the home of his maternal family's ancestors. FBI investigation. The Federal Bureau of Investigation was assigned the lead to investigate King's death. J. Edgar Hoover, who had previously made efforts to undermine King's reputation, told President Johnson that his agency would attempt to find the culprit. Many documents related to the investigation remain classified and are slated to remain secret until 2027, in 2010. As in earlier years, some argued for passage of a proposed Records Collection Act, similar to a 1992 law concerning the Kennedy assassination, to require the immediate release of the records. The measure did not pass. Funeral of Martin Luther King, Jr. A crowd of 300,000 attended King's funeral on April 9. Vice President Hubert Humphrey attended on behalf of Johnson, who was at a meeting on the Vietnam War at Camp David. There were fears that Johnson might be hit with protests and abuse over the war if he attended the funeral. At his widow's request, King's last sermon at Ebenezer Baptist Church was played at the funeral. It was a recording of his drum major sermon given on February 4, 1968. In that sermon, he asked that, at his funeral, no mention of his awards and honors be made, but that it be said he tried to feed the hungry, clothe the naked, be right on the Vietnam War question, and love and serve humanity. Martin Luther King Jr. shall be remembered to Afro-Americans and Africans because of his efforts he made to maintain the civil rights of the people in America and the world as whole. As people heard his death, they knew that it was a secret issue of American government to suppress civil rights movement. And to Afro-Americans was brutal action. That is why today the King is remembered for his contribution. Rest in peace, Martin Luther King Jr.
Wow! We hopes that you have enjoyed today's content. As we got the success to bring your favorites, let's welcome you to the next content to get more goods from us. But do not forget to subscribe, to like, to comment and to like our pages and channels. I am your host, Yarlik the Creator. Wish you a nice moment. Infinity Media. Met your favorites here. Okay, bye bye.
Infinity Media. Met your favorites here.